Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Hernick, and welcome to another week here at the Prairie Yard and Garden.
Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASIRA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.
We'll do an introduction first, and then where would be a good place to start after that?
We'll probably, mention this during the show, and then it can
From the very beginning, we wanted Prairie Yard and Garden to be a series that used science-based horticulture research. And I think it's continued to do that all these years. Prairie Yard and Garden was really an idea that came out of Pioneer Public Television. Ansel Doll was the general manager at the time, and he approached me about doing a horticultural series from our studios on the Morris campus, since they didn't have production facilities.
Prairie Yard and Garden was important for Pioneer because it was one of the first local programs ever broadcast on Pioneer. And it was a great partnership, and it showed the folks in the viewing area that we could have a quality, local public television, and people really gravitated toward it, and it's been popular ever since.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Hernick, and welcome to another week here at the Prairie Yard and Garden.
And I'm Rich Easton, and thank you for tuning us in this evening on our program. And tonight we'll be answering questions on annual flowers.
The series got started with some funds that were generated through a series that Pioneer Public Television had produced on farm finances through Minnesota Extension Service. And so we had money to do a pilot series. And so that first year we did 10 programs. We decided to do a live call-in series because it's in studio. It's actually production, from a production standpoint, they're fairly easy to do. We had two hosts. Our first hosts were Rich Easton, who was a Minnesota Extension educator from Madison, and Bob Hernick from Carlos, Minnesota, who was a Minnesota master gardener. We also had Wes Gray, who was really our resident expert, who was at the West Central Research Center here in Morris. He provided a lot of input and really, I think, got this program started from a content standpoint, so that he was very important. We would have one or two guests each week, topic specific, and we had local master gardeners, gardening clubs that would answer the telephones. I believe we had a bank of 4 people every week. And usually the show would be, first 10 minutes was discussion about the topic, and by that time the phone started to ring. And so the questions really provided the content for most of the program. Well, the first year we had 10 programs, and the next year we weren't able to find funding, but because of the popularity of the program, we wanted to continue it. Sort of keep that place on Pioneer Public's schedule so people didn't forget about us. So we did 5 programs the second season, and we got volunteer help from everyone.
Good evening and welcome to Prairie Yard and Garden. I'm Mary Ann Scharf, and Wes Gray and I are here tonight with Harlan Rosendahl, Douglas County Extension Agent from Alexandria, and David Kopachnik, owner and operator of Alexandria Nursery and Floral.
Mary Ann Scharf, who was a Minnesota Extension educator, hosted the programs, and we kept the same format, live call-in with 1 or 2 guests. We were very concerned about if the program would continue after even the second year. But I worked during the second season to obtain underwriters. And so we did get some funding for the third season. And we produced 15 shows for the third season. And we hired Wes Gray and Jim Thoreen to co-host the series. Wes Gray was a resident expert for the show. He was a local horticultural expert here at the West Central Experiment Station, instrumental in getting the show started. He had a lot of contacts. He knew the people, the guests to ask.
The viewers, how nice this actually works.
I remember pruning apple trees, and here I was, you know, I had just started here, you know, and we pruned an awful lot of apple trees, and so we knew how to prune trees, you know, and apple trees, which is an art in itself. So I remember climbing up in the apple tree, you know, and Wes Gray was down looking at the camera and whatnot, and pointing out what I was doing as I was climbing up in an apple tree and making cuts with the pruners and with a saw and whatnot. So for whatever reason, I remember that program well from way back.
And good evening on this Thursday in November 1992. And it's a very, well, more winter than it is fall out there. But good evening and welcome again to Prairie Yard and Garden for another full season of shows all about gardening, all about the backyard and how we can help you out.
We needed to get a co-host that could sort of open the show, close the show, sort of direct the on-set activities, and that's where Jim came in. Jim was not a horticultural person, but he had very good on-camera presence. So between the two of them, they really got us through the programs very well.
I first was involved in Prairie Yard and Garden after receiving a phone call from Roger Boleman. Roger had heard me on local radio on KMRS, and he knew that I had radio presence, and he wondered if I can't come over and help him out on campus doing live television, which I had never done before. Hi, I'm Jim Thoreen.
And I'm Wes Gray.
You know, Wes, here we sit in the midst of holiday splendor, but those early preparations for spring and summer are just days away.
Yes, it won't be long. Spring's going to be here.
And I said, well, why not? I love media, and it was an opportunity, and Roger offered it, and thank you, Roger. I was glad to do it for 3 seasons.
And then after the third season, we went to a 22 or 23 program season. We would start in October, break for the holidays, and then resume mid-January, and usually run into in the middle of May. Well, one of the things about producing a series like this is we needed to have people that had horticultural backgrounds. And we were very fortunate to have the West Central Research and Outreach Center right across the road. People like Wes Gray and Steve Poppy were very helpful in getting the program started and being a resource.
Prairie Yard and Garden, way back when, 30 years ago, kind of got its start here in the horticulture gardens. We were much smaller than we are now, but a lot of the things that we did, from apple research to strawberries to raspberries to flowers to perennials, whatnot, they were, as I recall, looking back, a lot of those programs were first shot here. My former faculty supervisor, Wes Gray, was very involved with the Prairie Yard and Garden at that time, and I was his technical assistant and helping with some of those programs. But as I recall, many programs were shot here because we had the display garden close to University of Minnesota Morris.
We also made some really nice connections and partnerships with the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum over the years, and with the University of Minnesota Horticultural Science Department on the St. Paul campus.
Attractive and to be at the university, we do have a challenge sometimes in getting our research, teaching, our new information out to the public. And although we have our extension service and our outreach arm, we're always looking for new vehicles to get more information out and new partnerships and collaboration. So working with Prairie Yard Garden has been wonderful for us because it reaches people who are not necessarily close to the university in the Twin Cities. They're in a different location in the state, and it just helps our message to get out to many more people.
A lot of the national gardening magazines and national TV shows have a lot of good information, but it's many times not really exactly what you need to be successful in Minnesota. So having a show that is produced here, Prairie Yard and Garden being a great example, you're talking to people that have experienced gardening here, talking about varieties that were developed by the University of Minnesota or other people here in Minnesota, adapted to our climate, growing conditions. And people, the best way to want to be continuing gardening is to when you start to be successful. And so to get the right information for beginning gardeners, or if you're gardening for 20 or 30 years, you can always learn something new that keeps you involved and interested. So I think it's extremely valuable.
We also were able to tie into the Minnesota Master Gardeners with their expertise. And we also were able to get extension educators in the area to help us.
The Master Gardener program now is housed here at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, and we're in Carver County, but of course the program is every county in Minnesota. That's a huge asset for the Arboretum, having these people that are well trained in horticulture, that are taking information from our gardens and our research projects elsewhere, and having a TV station for the Master Gardeners to be part of in some cases, certainly to learn from in other cases, are both extremely valuable. Even though we're here in Carver County, we can only be in one place. We consider ourselves the Minnesota Arboretum, and so we really want people from around the state to come here, but also we want them to learn what we're doing here through TV and other methods.
Also important, especially in the early years, were the nursery owners in the area. We relied on them not only for funding, but for their expertise. And I think it was a good combination that they had some exposure on television to a good audience, and they provided us very good information. And so we were very thankful for the nursery owners. So with all those people, we really had a great core of experts that really helped guide us through all these seasons. Jim and Wes co-hosted this series for a number of years, but Jim took a job across the state, and we lost him the second half of one of the seasons.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Prairie Yard and Garden. We're here in the studios at the University of Minnesota Morris, where the show is planned and produced each week and brought to you by Pioneer Public Television. I'm Kathy Ray.
We were able to get Kathy Ray, a local playwright, to come in and fill in as the co-host for the remainder of the season. And during the summer, we really analyzed the format we were using with two co-hosts. And we decided that it really makes sense to have one host that has a background in horticulture.
Welcome to Prairie Yard and Garden, and thanks for joining us. And let me extend a warm welcome to you, Levon.
Well, thank you for letting me be here tonight.
It's nice to have you here.
Thanks.
Well, you know, it's so refreshing to see all of these foliage plants here in the studio, and we
had a person that had been on our show a few times, Sue Gooch, who was a Minnesota Master Gardener, and she had very good on-camera presence as a guest. And so we asked her to be our host, and she accepted. And we had a very good run with Sue as host for Prairie Yard and Garden for a number of years.
Well, I first got involved with Prairie Yard and Garden in the very early years because they were looking for some ideas of programs. And then as the few years went by, I did a couple of programs as a guest, and it wasn't quite as hard as I thought it would be. And then at some point, Roger Boleman, who was the director at the time, asked me if I would be willing to be the host, and I looked at him with a funny look and said, "Really?" And I thought about it for a little bit, and I thought, well, I can take this challenge on, and so that's what I did.
Well, why don't we move along here? We've got some slides that give us an opportunity to see exactly what we're talking about.
Well, I followed Jim Thoreen, and Jim Thoreen was a great host. He was a radio guy, and so he could listen to the guest, and he could create questions in his head since he had lots of radio experience. He did not have a green thumb, and so he didn't really know a whole lot about gardening and about horticulture.
I don't have a green thumb, and I often made that remark to Wes Gray. He said, "Don't worry about it." And Wes always had that smile, that twinkle in his eye, and a great sense of humor. He said, "Don't worry about it, Jim. You just be here and keep me going and keep our guests going, and you'll do just fine." So now and then I would have to kind of fake it, like I almost knew something. I think the audience caught on.
So when I became the host, I was sort of at the opposite extreme. I knew quite a bit about gardening and horticulture. I was not a radio person. I did not know how to ask questions, but I learned fairly quickly that You don't ask a question that has a yes or no answer. Just that sort of change, I think, sort of changed somewhat the tenor of the program and the information that was being provided.
Well, during the mid-1990s, when Sue Gooch was the host, we made some changes to not only the set. We created a sort of the back porch look was one of the big changes, but we also started to do some little features. One was called the Master Gardener Tip of the Week that Sue wrote, and then during that time we also started the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum feature, Ask the Arboretum Expert, which continues to this day. And we think both of those added greatly to the program.
I have a question. I have an apple tree. And
in 2003, Pioneer Public Television approached us about doing all of our shows on location. We were doing 22 or 23 a year in the studio, and now we would be doing 13. It sort of fits in with their broadcast schedule better. So that year we started doing on-location programs, and we've been doing them since. It changed the way we were doing the show in a number of ways. Logistically, it created more problems, but at the same time, it created a lot more interesting programs. And we had a variety of guests and locations over the years, not only good for the viewers, but I think it was a lot of fun for the production staff to go out on these shoots as well. During this time, with Sue Gooch as host, we got expanded coverage of our programs. Pioneer Public Television put transmitters in the Fergus Falls area and in the Worthington area. We actually got into Sioux Falls in northern Iowa. And then North Dakota Public Television picked up our programs, as well as South Dakota Public Television. So we really expanded our viewing area. It was a little concern for us because we've been dealing with a smaller geographic area, and we were trying to keep things relevant to our growing area. Also during this time, we moved up in the Pioneer Public's viewer preference poll. We were always around the top 10, but now we're starting to move into the top 3 or 4.
One of the things I've seen about Prairie Yard and Garden is that this show is important to our audience. We do a survey a couple of times a year of our members, and we ask them to rank their favorite programs. And one of the favorite programs year after year is Prairie Yard and Garden. So it's very clear. Our viewers love it, our members love it, and it's another reason why it's great to have it in the schedule.
In 2009, Sue Gooch and her husband retired and moved to Alexandria. And we really had to think about if we wanted to continue this show. We were concerned that we might lose the popularity. We've had a long-serving host. Pioneer Public said, no, the show is popular. We want you to continue it. And so we started looking for a new host.
Hosta plants have been the favorite shade plant for many gardeners for many years. Join me on Prairie Yard and Garden as we explore what's happening in the hosta plant world.
One of our guests that I was on a few times happened to be a Minnesota extension educator from Alexandria, Larry Zilliox. He also had a live horticultural radio show. So we thought, well, you know what, this could work. It's not radio we're doing, of course, but you know, he can talk with guests, and so we hired him to be our host for that new season, and it worked out quite well.
My recommendation this year is do minimal amount of pruning, just because we don't know how hard this winter has been. And
and from that, apparently, I did okay answering those questions and so forth. And eventually, when Sue Gooch retired, I was asked to come on board and follow up with the show. And it was a great experience.
Right here is Golden Alexander.
I think one of the unique things about Prairie Yard and Garden is that got a wide variety of guests that we go interview. As you're walking through and talking with those guests, you get an opportunity to focus on a particular plant that you're talking about. And I always thought that Prairie Yard and Garden did a superb job of focusing on that flower and putting it over our heads so that we weren't a talking head show, that you actually got to look in depth and had 20, 30 seconds worth of that unique flower covering your TV screen. And in the middle of January and February, when it's pretty bleak outside, that color, I think, just helps sell the show. And I appreciate that aspect of doing the show because I didn't need to be on camera. Let's show the plants.
Well, in 2010, we had to make a change. It was kind of forced upon us, but for the better. This is when all the broadcast stations across the country were forced to go to high definition broadcast. And so we either had to adapt or probably get out of the game, and we had to buy all new equipment and to continue on to the Prairie Yard and Garden. And it turned out very well. When you look at the quality of the programs, the technical quality of the high definition versus the old standard definition, you know, there's a world of difference. And in a program like Prairie Yard and Garden that really relies on a lot of good footage of flowers and, you know, close-ups of plants, it becomes very important. Well, Prairie Yard and Garden has evolved greatly over the years, and it gets more sophisticated, I believe, especially from the technology standpoint. You know, you have to kind of keep up with the times. But you know what? All good things come to an end, and for me, that was in 2014 when I decided to retire. It had been really a good run. But I also had a production coordinator, Mike Seahawk, that worked with me all those years from when we first started doing the on-location shooting. In fact, he developed the concept of the Arboretum feature, which was still being used. He was involved with all aspects of the production. And so I know it was left in good hands. And now we've had a couple of seasons with Mike producing the series. And I think it's growing even better. And so I congratulate Mike on the switch to being the producer and look for many more seasons of Prairie Yard and Garden.
The transition from being a production coordinator, being the videographer and editor, to being producers, it's been exciting, invigorating, and also stressful, because now you have to come up with the host, what are you going to do? What are the 13 shows going to be? And when Roger retired in 2014, our host, Larry Zilliox, thought, you know, it might be a good time for me to hang it up too. So it was kind of baptism by fire. So we not only had to develop the next season, but I had to find a host as well. And so that process took a couple of months, but we did find, I think, a very good host in this, and Mary Holm, and really helped me along with that. But yeah, that first couple of months was like, what did I get myself into?
You know, I don't think there's a lot more lilies grown in the country.
I first got involved with Prairie Yard and Garden because I was friends with the producer Mike Seahawk. And we were visiting one day, and I knew that the former host, Larry Zilliox, wanted to retire because he has this beautiful bed and breakfast that he runs. I just made the comment that, you know, that'd be kind of a fun job. About a month later, Mike called me up and said, remember when you said that would be a fun job? How would you like to fill in? And so I did, and have been involved with Prairie Yard and Garden ever since.
For her to come on board at that time was really a blessing for us, because she did come up with a lot of that knowledge that we didn't have to worry about. We could develop 13 programs or topics, identify guests, look for locations, and if I didn't have somebody with that caliber, I think it would have been much more difficult that first year.
And blooming again in September. I'd have to say, when I first started with Prairie Yard and Garden, each episode was a knee-knocking situation, because I was so nervous that I don't know if it showed up on the shows or not, but I'm sure that my legs were just shaking.
As a host, she is very connected in the nursery and gardening industry.
I think the industry benefits from programs like Prairie Yard and Garden because it's an educational program, and it brings horticulture and its many benefits to so many people. There's just so many great things that people can learn by watching the program. Just the more knowledge we can spread and the more we can educate people, the better the industry is.
One thing I like about working on the show is every day is different. You go to a different location, you meet different people. The shoot that sticks out in my mind is the coldest shoot I've ever been on. And Roger Boleman comes in and says, oh, by the way, you need to go and record Steve Poppy covering his strawberries with straw. And that was just about a mile from our studio, so fine, I'll go and do that. I get on my coat, I go, and I grab the camera, and it had to have been the coldest shoot I've been on. The wind was howling down the Pomme de Terre River Valley, and I'm sitting there shooting Steve Poppy and his dad on the tractor, putting straw on these strawberry plants, and the wind was probably 25 miles an hour. And I was even looking in the camera going, what am I doing here? Because I thought, Roger's in a nice warm area in the studio, and I'm here freezing my tail off. And so that was a shoot I'll always remember, and that was a long time ago. Thanks a lot, Roger. Well, with the move to high definition and digital television, it's really expanded our audience base. So about 4 years ago, all stations, especially PBS and Pioneer Public TV, now they had more avenues to show their content. And the biggest one of them all is the expansion to DirecTV and Dish Network in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market. And that has grown our audience base immensely. We go shoot in the Twin Cities. Mary gets noticed all the time. And I think a lot of this expansion we're talking about and going to different markets is really due to the fact of the hard work of Les Heen and the staff at Pioneer Public Television.
So what's happened is a program that used to be seen only in an area around Appleton is now seen, at least for some viewers, in an area from the Missouri River to western Wisconsin. So the distribution of the program has increased dramatically in that way. And also, we have also added digital channels. We have a channel called Create, and on that channel we put Prairie Yard and Garden into a slot there as well, so people can see it through a whole other channel.
And I really appreciate that because a lot more eyes get onto our program. A lot more people become avid watchers of our program because of that investment that they have made.
I also talked about a little bit about the depth of the flowers, and you'll notice the zinnias were great examples.
The great thing about the partnership between Pioneer Public Television and the University of Minnesota Morris is that we both bring something to the table that's important. The University of Minnesota Morris brings together the people who really know about gardening, the experts, the master gardeners, the people at the Arboretum, the folks who really know the business of gardening, and then in the case of Pioneer, we bring to it a distribution system. So, and in between that, of course, you have Roger Boleman, who worked in the program for many years, and Mike Seahawk, who's worked in the program for many years. And those are the people who know how to shoot the stories, how to make it work. They've got the experience with the program. So it's a great partnership. It brings together Pioneer's ability to distribute the program to a wide audience, the university expertise, and then Roger and Mike doing their work because they know how to shoot television programs. I think one of the exciting things about the future of Prairie Yard and Garden is that we know people still love gardening. Gardening is popular. It's not declining in popularity. And with online distribution, what you're finding is people in new areas, people who've never seen the program before, having access to it, people who maybe have an interest in a particular garden product or plant variety that they can search it and find it. And so we're going to be able to reach a lot of people who might in the past not have seen Prairie Yard and Garden, and now they'll see it, they'll enjoy it, and it'll be just great for everyone involved.
You know, in this day and age of content on the internet, social media, I still think having programming on a television network like Pioneer Public Television gives it a lot of credibility. Our guests are credible. We have guests from the Arboretum, from the Extension Service, from nursery owners. You know, we have enthusiasts and backyard gardeners. But I really think that people want to come to Pioneer Public TV and Prairie Yard and Garden because the programming is credible. It's something to believe in. They're going to invest their time to watch this and learn something. And that, I think, is the underlying mission of Pioneer Public Television, is to learn, to create, and to be inspired. That's why I think that's where Prairie Yard and Garden really meshes well with Pioneer's missions, because that's what we want to do. We want to teach people, we want to inspire them in horticulture, and we want them to create something.